There is a kind of silence that does not just hurt you. It rearranges you. It happens after the warm messages turn brief, after the eyes that once softened around you become harder to read, after the closeness suddenly feels like something they are surviving instead of something they want. And you sit there, staring at your phone, replaying every moment, every word, every shift in tone, trying to understand how someone can feel so present one week and so unreachable the next. You tell yourself, maybe they got busy, maybe they are stressed, maybe you are overthinking it. But deep down, your body knows. Something changed. And what makes it so painful is not just the distance, it is the contradiction. Because you felt something real. You saw it, in the way they watched you when you were not looking, in the softness they tried to hide, in those small moments when their guard slipped, and they let you feel the part of them they almost never show. So now, the confusion becomes its own addiction. If it was real, why are they pulling away? If they care, why does it feel like abandonment? If they felt safe with you, why are they acting like your love is pressure? This is where most people break themselves, trying to get an answer. They chase, they explain, they overgive. They become more patient, more available, more understanding, thinking love will calm what fear has disturbed. But here is the brutal truth. The more you try to pull a dismissive avoidant closer when they feel overwhelmed, the more their system experiences you as the overwhelm. Not because you are too much, not because your love is wrong, but because intimacy, for them, does not only awaken desire, it awakens danger. That is the part almost nobody tells you. A dismissive avoidant does not shut down because they feel nothing. They shut down because they feel too much, too fast, in a nervous system that was trained to survive by disconnecting. What looks cold on the outside is often a storm on the inside. What looks indifferent is often flooded. Their body can register closeness the way another person would register threat. The amygdala starts firing. Stress chemicals rise, cortisol builds. The nervous system shifts from connection into protection. And instead of moving toward the bond, they move away from the intensity of what the bond is stirring up. So when you ask, why are they acting like they don't care? The deeper answer is often this: because caring opened a door they do not know how to walk through without feeling like they are losing control. That is why dismissive avoidance is so disorienting. Their feelings can be real, but their reaction to those feelings can still look like distance, numbness, irritation, or escape. They can miss you and ignore you, want you and resist you, feel attached and then convince themselves they need less, feel less, be less affected than they actually are. This is not a game to them. It is a reflex. A survival reflex built long before you. Usually, the dismissive avoidant learns something early in life that no child should have to learn. Needing too much is unsafe. Reaching does not bring comfort. Vulnerability costs dignity. Dependence ends in disappointment. So they adapted. They became self-contained. They taught themselves not to expect, not to lean, not to reveal too much. They built identity out of self-sufficiency. Distance became dignity. Control became safety. And then love enters. Real love. Not surface-level chemistry. Not casual attraction. Real closeness. The kind that sees them. The kind that reaches places they have spent years sealing shut. And that is exactly when the system panics. Because something in them wants to stay, and something older in them wants to run. This is the paradox you have to understand if you ever want to stop taking their behavior personally. They did not necessarily stop caring when they pulled away. In many cases, they felt overwhelmed by how much they were starting to care. Overwhelmed by the dependency they could feel forming. Overwhelmed by the possibility of being known, affected, needed, disappointed, exposed. So they do what their body has always done. They reduce contact. They become vague. They delay responses. They act fine when they are not fine. They start focusing on flaws, yours or the relationship's, just to create emotional distance. They tell themselves they need space. They insist nothing is wrong. And then they disappear into themselves and call it clarity. But here is what most people do not realize. The more emotionally significant you become to a dismissive avoidant, the more likely they are to feel the urge to create distance. Not because significance makes them careless, because significance makes them vulnerable. And vulnerability, in an unhealed avoidance system, can feel humiliating. This is why pleading almost never works. This is why emotional pressure backfires. This is why trying to force a conversation while they are deactivating usually makes them shut down even harder. Your urgency may come from love, but their nervous system reads it as engulfment. They do not experience it as, "This person wants closeness." They experience it as, "I am losing room to breathe." So if you are waiting for the moment a dismissive avoidant finally opens up, you need to understand something deeper than tactics. They do not open because they are cornered. They open when they no longer feel cornered by intimacy itself. And that leads to the one concept that changes everything. Non-reactive space. Not punishment, not silence designed to manipulate, not performing detachment while secretly monitoring every move. Real, non-reactive space. The kind that says, without saying it, "I am not here to invade you, chase you, or collapse because you pulled back. I can remain emotionally steady without forcing you to regulate through me. I can care without gripping. I can love without abandoning myself." That energy does something profound to a dismissive avoidant because it interrupts the pattern they expect. They expect pursuit. They expect guilt. They expect pressure disguised as vulnerability. They expect your fear to rush in the second they retreat. And when that happens, it confirms their deepest wiring. Closeness always turns into obligation, intensity, and loss of freedom. But when you stop reacting from panic, something shifts. Now they are left alone with their own experience. Now the noise disappears. Now there is room for missing you. This is where people misunderstand the dynamic. They think a dismissive avoidant opens up because they finally realize your value in some abstract way. That is part of it, but not the core of it. What really happens is more visceral. When your anxious energy is no longer constantly reaching into their space, their nervous system finally has a chance to come out of defense. The threat level drops. The need to resist softens. And underneath that resistance, feelings that were pushed down begin to rise again. Not all at once, usually in flashes. A memory hits them in the middle of something ordinary. The way you looked at them when they were quiet. The safety of your presence. The steadiness they pretended not to need. A song, a place, a sentence you said that felt too true at the time. And suddenly, the absence they asked for does not feel like relief anymore. It feels like you are gone. That is when the dismissive avoidant often starts opening in the only way they know how at first. Indirectly. They check your stories. They reread old messages. They hover. They send something casual that means more than it sounds like. They ask a practical question they could have answered themselves. They test the water without admitting they miss the ocean. Because direct vulnerability still scares them. But the longing is there. And this is where your power either returns to you or you lose it again. Because when they come back in small, cautious ways, every wounded part of you will want to rush forward and finally get the emotional payoff you have been starving for. You will want to ask where they have been. You will want to explain how much they hurt you. You will want them to prove immediately that this time will be different. And maybe one day they will. But if they are just beginning to open, too much emotional demand too quickly can throw them right back into defense. This does not mean you suppress your needs. It means you stop spilling them into moments that cannot hold them. There is a difference. You become discerning. You become measured. You stop treating every sign of return like a guarantee of readiness. Because sometimes a dismissive avoidant misses you without yet having the capacity to love you well. That truth matters. A lot. Yes, they can come back softer. Yes, they can begin to reveal what they were feeling. Yes, they can admit they got overwhelmed, that they shut down, that they did not know how to handle the closeness. Some do. Some finally say the words you thought you would never hear. Some confess that your calm affected them more than your chasing ever did. Some even tell you that your absence made them realize how deeply attached they had become. But do not romanticize this moment too quickly. Opening up is not the same as healing. A crack in the armor is not the same as emotional availability. And if you do not understand that, you can get trapped in the most seductive phase of all. The phase where they are just vulnerable enough to reignite your hope, but not yet regulated enough to sustain intimacy. This is why breaking the pattern matters. Not just for them, for you. Because if your self-worth depends on finally being chosen by someone who only opens in fragments, then you are still organizing your life around scarcity, around emotional crumbs, around the fantasy that if you love perfectly enough, you can make another person safe enough to stay. You cannot. Your love can be beautiful. Your patience can be rare. Your presence can be deeply regulating. But none of that can heal a person who is still committed to disappearing every time love becomes real. And that is the warning. Do not confuse their soft moments with transformation. Do not confuse access with consistency. Do not confuse longing with capacity. A dismissive avoidant may finally open up when they feel safe, unpressured, and free enough to hear their own feelings. But whether they stay open depends on something much deeper than your strategy. It depends on whether they are willing to face the part of themselves that equates intimacy with loss of control. It depends on whether they can sit inside vulnerability without numbing, distancing, or blaming the bond. It depends on whether they are ready to stop worshipping independence at the cost of connection. And your job is not to force that awakening. Your job is to become the kind of person who no longer abandons themselves while waiting for it. That is the real shift, the one that changes everything. Because something powerful happens when you stop making their openness the prize. When you stop seeing their vulnerability as the final proof of your worth. When you stop measuring your value by how much someone emotionally defended can or cannot receive. You get your center back. And from that place, your energy changes. You stop radiating hunger. You stop collapsing into confusion. You stop reading silence like a verdict on your lovability. You understand the dynamic without excusing the damage. You can hold compassion without self-betrayal. You can see them clearly without shrinking yourself to fit their fears. And ironically, this is often the exact moment the power dynamic flips. Because now they feel the difference. Now your absence is not just physical, it is energetic. The easy access is gone. The emotional overavailability is gone. The constant reassurance is gone. And what they once pushed away without fully understanding begins to feel irreplaceable. They start wondering if you have moved on. They start replaying how safe you actually were. They start feeling the emotional weight of what they kept minimizing. They start missing not just your attention, but your steadiness, your warmth, your depth. The way you saw them without demanding performance. And what unsettles them most is this. You are no longer waiting in the same way. That is when obsession can begin to replace avoidance. Not always in dramatic ways, sometimes quietly, sometimes slowly, but the internal tide turns. The person who once suppressed their attachment starts feeling it more vividly because the buffer is gone. The person who once needed distance now feels the ache of it. The one who ran from emotional intensity begins to be haunted by the emotional reality they outran. And if they are honest with themselves, they realize something painful. The connection did not suffocate them. Their fear did. That realization can open doors, real doors, the kind that lead to truth, to accountability, to emotional honesty that is shaky but sincere, to the first unguarded conversation where they stop pretending they were unaffected, where they admit they felt too much, where they tell you they did not know how to hold closeness without wanting to escape it, where they finally name the thing they spent so long hiding from you and from themselves. I cared more than I knew what to do with. For a dismissive avoidant, that sentence can feel like standing naked in winter. It is not small. It is everything. But even then, your deepest power is not in making that confession happen. Your deepest power is in knowing who you are, whether it happens or not. Because the truth is, the moment a dismissive avoidant finally opens up is not the moment your life begins. It is not the crown on your worth. It is not proof that you are finally enough. You were enough before their walls trembled. You were enough when they pulled away. Enough when they went silent. Enough when they could not meet you in the depth you offered. Enough when your heart wanted to make their distance mean something about you. It never did. Their withdrawal was never a measurement of your value. It was a measurement of their capacity. And once you truly understand that, something inside you gets quieter, stronger, cleaner. You stop begging to be let in. You become someone whose presence is a gift, not a plea. Someone who can love deeply without drowning in someone else's confusion. Someone who no longer mistakes being chosen by the unavailable for being powerful. That is when your self-worth stops negotiating. That is when your nervous system stops worshipping inconsistency. That is when love stops being a performance of endurance and becomes a standard. And in that state, whether they open or not, whether they return or not, whether they finally say the words or stay hidden behind their fear, you are no longer trapped inside their pattern. You are free of it. And that freedom is magnetic. Because there is nothing more powerful than someone who understands the psychology of distance, feels the grief of it fully, and still refuses to abandon themselves to win what should be offered willingly. So if you have been asking what makes a dismissive avoidant finally open up, The answer is not simple, and it is not always satisfying. Sometimes it is the loss of pressure. Sometimes it is the shock of your absence. Sometimes it is the safety of your non-reactivity. Sometimes it is the moment they realize the person they ran from was the only place they felt genuinely seen. Sometimes it is pain. Sometimes it is growth. Sometimes it is too late. But your transformation begins the moment you stop centering their opening and start honoring your own. That is the real story. Not how to make them open, but how you became unbreakable while they were deciding whether to. And when that lands, truly lands, you will not just feel understood. You will feel your power return. Quietly. Completely. For good.